We're not going to talk about buckets or flags or bits of code, okay? So what I'd like you to do, because I want you to change context, is to stand up, turn around, okay? Just like this. Stand up and turn around. Now, this is an NLP technique for changing context. So now sit down, everybody, and thank you very much. Okay, I'm John, and as... Let me just check this. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I've got all the qualifications and stuff, but basically what I've been doing for the last few years is actually coaching teams. And I had people come to me and said, you're doing all this stuff with IT, but I work in marketing, or I work in HR, or I work in transformation. How can you help me? So I was sort of thinking, well, how do I really start to help these people, right? And I was convinced that Agile would actually help people. And so I started to go back to the basics, you know, the Tuckman model, the way in which teams form, and all of this sort of stuff. So I started to work on this and go right the way back to basics and look for what makes a difference between an Agile team and a non-Agile team, right? I wrote a book called the Agile Coaches Cookbook. We're training in JP Morgan people. We've done 70 coaches. In British Telecom, where I was working before, I was doing network engineers and software engineers, and we trained those guys. And that experience has left me with a knowledge of what non-tech Agile is all about, okay? So let's just say to this, what the data says is that only 30% of our workforce are actively engaged. It's come from a Manpower report. And the other thing that's happened in the last few years is, have you heard of the Great Resignation? The Great Resignation is that 41% of the American workforce resigned, right, and changed jobs. Do you know that's 60 million people? That's the size of the UK population, changed jobs. And the predominant reason given was that the culture of their organization didn't suit them. Okay, so if we're starting to talk about having Agile teams and Agile ways of working, and we can see Net Promoter Score in our software development teams going up in terms of employee satisfaction, then we can also apply the same techniques to other parts of the business to increase satisfaction. So my then thesis was, well, what is Agile? What makes it different? Right? And if you really look at Agile, it's all about a set of mindsets, right? It's about the fact that we're looking at a series of practices that instead of relying on the individual, like a project manager or a leader, relies on the collective intelligence of the team. Okay, so instead of me producing the plan, all the people on the front row produce the plan, and they own that plan, and they then deliver to that plan. And it's that way of working that gets the engagement of the people, and it's that way of self-determination. Okay, so what I thought, well, what is Agile? Well, I've had a huge row with I'm working with a guy in JP Morgan who really is a Scrum evangelist, right? And I've had a big argument with him with whether Agile started with the Agile Manifesto or not. And I really do think that, you know, Deming produced a lot of the stuff that is in the Agile Manifesto in his Out of the Crisis, 14 points. And I got to the point where I said, well, look, Deming says, you know, we value the person. And he said, yeah, but it's point 14, it's point 2 in Scrum. And I thought, oh, that's enough. I've had enough of that. Right, so Agile has been around since Deming, and I really do believe that. And in fact, Stephen this morning was talking about the fact that the voice of the customer came from Peter Drucker, right? And it's the same sort of timescale. The Agile, as we know it today, was really popularized by the Agile Manifesto in 2001. There's no doubt about that, right? But the Agile Manifesto is actually sort of more about ways of working than it is about software. Okay, even though it's called the Agile Manifesto for Software Development. The whole of Agile, whether it's Kanban, whether it's Scrum, whether it's SAFe, I'll stop there, where it's all of those, right, is all based on what we call the Deming cycle, right? It's all based on planning something, doing something, checking that we've got it, and then adjusting our plan because based on the feedback, right? And that plan, do, check, act cycle, or plan, to, study, adjust, is absolutely the essence of what we're doing in terms of Agile. So how do we take that plan, do, study, adjust, and deal with it in a transformation, or organizational development, or marketing, okay? That was the big question that we have. So the Agile principles that I wanted to imply in our ways of working were, firstly, Agile harnesses the intelligence of the human beings, right? And it's not reliant on a single individual. Yesterday, some of you may have heard me talk about value streams and mapping and all that stuff. We were talking about flow. And what we're looking at with Agile is that outcomes are delivered in increments. Okay? So what we do is we chunk down a big solution into meaningful pieces of value, and then we deliver those. The team does the plan, do, study, adjust. Last but not least, actually this is an incredibly important element, was that the plans in Agile are produced during the activity, whereas in waterfall or traditional project management, plans are produced before the activity. Okay, so what that means is that you can get some feedback from your team, from your market, from what you're trying to change, and you can actually get that feedback into your team, and then you can adjust accordingly. Okay, so now let's start to do something called system theory. I said to you I wanted to take everything back to first principles. I used something called the system of profound knowledge, which was a Deming piece, which is about actually identifying what the team is expecting to happen, and also then what is the outcome and how do we learn from that, right? But systems thinking is about looking at a team and what they're doing and understanding from the whole rather than from the individuals. If you think of a team that is developing something, there are three elements to that. The first is, what are they trying to achieve? Okay, the solution, the outcome that they want. The second is the process by which they want to do that outcome. Okay, the process by which they develop, the means of production. And last but not least, there's the team themselves, the behaviors, the collaboration and so on. Do you find it strange, because I do you find it strange that Scrum, SAFe, doesn't talk anything about team building, and yet the essence of Agile is all about working as a team? It just doesn't make sense to me, really. Okay? So let's start to think about system thinking, right? First of all, we've got a solution. Okay, let's say it's my transformation. My transformation that I'm currently working on for JP Morgan, the goal is value, pace, and transparency. Those are the three goals, and we've broken those down, and we've defined those particular outcomes in terms of OKRs. Now, the OKRs give us the breakdown and the measurements by which we're going to get success, okay? We have then used something, have you come across Mike Kottmeyer's idea of base camps and expeditions, right? Kottmeyer talks about the fact that we need to get to a position and then consolidate and before we move on, okay? So in defining that backlog, we have to define what the increments are that we're going to deliver. So let's work out what those increments are and so on, and then we can start to say, are we getting there? Now, the thing about most Agile transformation activities is you need to get feedback. You need to put into place a management information system that gives you the data that you need, what you're trying to change, okay? So basically we've got a review at the end that looks at, have we got to where we want to get in the time that we wanted to do it, right? Last, we've got the actual process itself. How are we going to do this? What are we going to do? What's the processes we're going to use, okay? We have got Scrum talks about inspecting progress. But the trouble with using Scrum for transformation is it's very difficult to get to a definition of done. Or at least it's very difficult to get to a definition of done within a meaningful window. So when we're starting to plan with the transformations and so on, actually Scrum doesn't work because you can't produce the outcome and get the feedback, the plan, do, check, act, in the 2-week windows. So I'm using a 30, 60, 90-day plan at the moment, and we're inspecting the progress on a regular basis. We're also looking at retrospection, right? And we have an enhancement workshop in the middle of the time box, in the middle of the iteration. So 15 days in of our 30, 60, 90 days, we do a review and we say, okay, how do we improve? How can we check that? How can we make it better? Last but not least, what we're doing is making sure that we're getting there. So after the midpoint of the 30 days, which is our iteration cycle, what we make sure is we move away from work that we need to get done to work that we need to finish, okay? And that basically is the essence of what we're doing with the team. So we're creating plans based on the increments that we've defined in the solution. We're monitoring that in daily walking the board activities, or you might call that a Scrum type meeting, but it's basically where the team is inspecting progress. We're looking for improvements, because there's nobody that's, we can't do Agile without looking at continuous improvement, and then we're inspecting for completion. So here we've got our means of production. The interesting thing is when you start to look at marketing, it might be creating marketing plans, it could be creating multimedia channels, it could be all sorts of different things that could go into that plan that goes into mobilization and planning, right? You could be, if you're doing HR projects, they might do staff surveys, they might do NPS, employee NPS scores. All of those sort of things are the things that generate the information that we need for the transformation, okay? The other thing that you've got to realize is, and go back to Mike Kottmeyer's expeditions and base camps, unlike software, right? If you produce a piece of software and you test it, it's tested, right? What happens is when you're doing transformational work is you get to the individual and then they because they come under pressure, they go back again, okay? So team building, team working as a team, let's work as a team, let's work at the external relationships. How are we building those pieces? How are we building the team together to operate as a team? I've got a team that I was trying to coach where 4 of the individuals are in India and 5 of the individuals are in Argentina. Their golden time, i.e. the working day time at the overlap, is about 45 minutes. It's 90 minutes effectively. And that's no way we can't build a team like that, okay? Because you can't get that interdependency and all the other things that go on in that environment. Now, at the end of each iteration, what we do is we start to look at context. Let's start to say what's changed. So if we've just delivered something and we've got some really positive feedback and they now say, right, we want to now move on to do it somewhere else, we can change the context. It gives us feedback into our solution. It gives us feedback into our mobilization and planning. If we've lost a team member, gained a team member, okay, that may change our team building. So that context assessment at the beginning of each iteration, and go back to it's a 30, 60, 90-day plan, gives us the ability to start to adjust and do our plan, do, check, adjust. So I called this Agile line out because you can see it's got 3 lines, right? 2 operational lines, okay, the solution and the production line. And mirroring the ball that goes down the middle, you've got the team. And it's the essential part that, there's no point in playing a game without the ball, right? And it's a bit the same with our Agile team. So this is system thinking that I've worked on in terms of building that out, right? The last bit which I've got for you is our outcome plan. So I mentioned to you that we're using OKRs. Here is our Agile sundial. This is the sundial which says these are the things that we're going to do in the next 30 days. And we've got themes that have come through. So we've got a theme called organization, we've got a theme called team and finance, we've got themes about building the capabilities, we've got themes about ways of working. And then you've got the various key milestones. So this gives us a plan on a page to give to senior management to say, here's where we've got to. And we change the colors, you know. If it's black, we haven't started it. If it's blue, it's in progress. If it's green, it's finished. So we actually give them that date. And then obviously at the end of the so this is based on our quarterly plan, okay? And at the end of that quarter, what we do is we revise the plan. But of course, we're doing a rolling wave, right? So we would increase the detail so we'd move everything down. So if this is now September and the 60 days is October, the end of the month we'll move the other stuff down, expand the details, and go from there. So what I've showed you is, right, we don't need Scrum, we don't use TDD, we're using different type of approaches in this environment. We're looking at how can we develop the team, as well as develop the plan, as well as develop the solution. We're defining the solution in terms of outcomes. Okay? Did I do it? I did.
You did it.
I did it. Good Gloucester boy, got it there.
Yeah. Questions, guys, questions. I'm waiting. And I have one.
Good.
Which part of the transformation is the most difficult to plan? So when you've been planning this 30, 60, 90, which was that you said, oh my God, how to plan it?
Okay, the most difficult piece to plan is what to do with the managers that lose their role. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the most difficult piece, because these guys have got into a position where they've got their position of power or authority based on their knowledge base or their experience or whatever, and now you're changing all of that. So it's always the human side of the transformation which is most difficult.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any more questions?
Sorry? What have I got in my hand? I've got 2 copies of the book which documents Agile on it. If anybody wants to have a look at it, it's here. And I don't want to take it back to the UK with me, so it's here.
We have the questions. What's the best way to build a team?
Best way to build a team, right, okay. Somebody was in the session yesterday, we actually talked about team formation models. Have a look at a paper by the name Building Teams for Performance by Dickinson and McIntyre. It comes from 1992, and it talks to you about how do you break down team building based on the communication, the way the team's operating, the inputs, the team leadership, not formal leadership, but informal leadership. It talks about building that team from their communication, getting their backups and so on. So it's around coaching, but it's using that model, you can diagnose what's actually happening within the team to actually then start to build it out.
And we have one last question. Have you experienced the teams when the IT people work together hand in hand with non-IT people, like from marketing, and they produce the value at the end of the increment?
Yes. In parts of British Telecom, what they're doing is that they're moving from telephone exchanges and bits of wire and bits of tin and putting stuff in the cloud. Right? So network engineers, network designers were working with technologists who were moving the stuff into the cloud, right? But we didn't go for the sprint, we went for the 30, 60, 90 days to make sure that we then had incremental deliveries from the software as well as incremental deliveries from the team. So it's about harmonizing. If you use a tech term, we're harmonizing the sprint length. That's basically what we're doing.
Thank you very much.